It started one evening when I returned home, just like any other. The sound of the door creaking open was a constant in my life. I never thought I would ever associate that sound with the shift that was about to happen. It was supposed to be a routine night, me coming home from a long, grueling day at work, Amara, my wife, doing whatever she did when I wasn't around. I had no reason to think that things would be any different. But they were. They were about to change completely. I walked into the house, dropped my bag by the door, and called out, "Amara? You here?" No response. It wasn't unusual. She was often in her study or in the kitchen, absorbed in whatever project she was working on. I shrugged it off and made my way into the living room. The house was quieter than usual, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound. It felt off, like the calm before a storm. I found her sitting on the couch, her legs crossed, a glass of wine in hand. She looked up when she heard me approach, but there was no smile, no warmth in her expression. "Hey," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "How's your day?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a long sip from her glass and set it down on the table. The silence stretched between us, and I felt the weight of it. It was the kind of silence that made my heart race for no reason. You know the type, right? The kind that gnaws at you, makes you wonder if you've missed something, if you've overlooked some growing distance. "Can we talk?" she asked, finally breaking the silence. I was taken aback. This wasn't the usual request for a quick discussion about the mundane things in life. What's for dinner? What time we need to be at my parents' house on Sunday? No, this felt different. The tension in her voice gave it away. I nodded, unsure of what was coming next. I sat down across from her, unsure of how to prepare for whatever she had in store. She looked at me for a moment, almost like she was gathering her thoughts, and then she said it. "You're not the man I thought you were." The words landed like a hammer, cold and unrelenting. I blinked, not entirely sure I heard her correctly. What did she mean by that? I racked my brain, trying to piece together the moment that had led to this. Was it something I'd said? Something I hadn't done? Or maybe it was something bigger, something I had missed entirely. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though a knot was forming in my stomach. She sighed, her fingers fidgeting with the rim of her wine glass. "You've changed, Sean. I don't know when it happened, but you're not a man anymore." I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. I felt this strange mixture of confusion, frustration, and hurt swirling inside me. Was she really saying this? After everything we'd been through together? I thought about the years of support I'd given her, the endless hours I'd spent working to make our lives better, the countless sacrifices I'd made for her, for us. "You're always so passive," she continued, her voice tinged with impatience. "You just go along with whatever happens. You don't stand up for yourself, and you don't stand up for us." Her words were like daggers, each one piercing deeper than the last. I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed silent. What was there to say? She had already made up her mind, and no amount of explaining would change that. But I couldn't let it go. Not this time. "Is that what you think?" I finally said, trying to hold back the frustration that was bubbling up. "You think I'm passive? You think I've just been going through the motions?" Her eyes met mine, but there was no warmth in them. "Yes," she said, almost dismissively. "And I can't keep living like this. I need someone who takes control, someone who knows what he wants out of life. You've become comfortable, and I can't be with someone who doesn't challenge me, who doesn't make me feel alive." The words were like a slap. My mind raced as I tried to process what she was saying. Comfortable? Is that how she saw me? Was I really just going through the motions? I didn't feel like I was. But the more she talked, the more I realized she was right about one thing. Things had become routine. Predictable. I had let everything slip into autopilot. I had become someone I didn't even recognize anymore. She wasn't wrong. But what did that mean for me? Was I supposed to fight for her? To prove myself in some way that would make her see me as the man she wanted me to be? Or had I already lost that chance? I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in what felt like forever. The woman who was supposed to be my partner, my equal. The woman I had tried so hard to please. But now, as she stood there before me, telling me I wasn't enough, I realized something. I wasn't the one who had changed. I had been doing everything to hold it all together, and somehow, in the process, I had forgotten what it meant to stand up for myself, to be true to who I was. "You're right," I said, my voice steady, but with an edge of finality. "I haven't been the man you wanted. But maybe that's not my fault anymore. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean? I stood up, taking a deep breath. I mean, maybe I've been living my life for you. Maybe I've been trying so hard to be what I thought you wanted that I lost sight of who I am. But you know what? I'm done. If I'm not man enough for you, then maybe I'm just done trying. Her face twisted in disbelief. You're just going to give up? After everything we've been through? I didn't flinch. No, I'm not giving up. I'm finally choosing myself. You think I'm not man enough? Fine. I'll show you what a real man does. He leaves. And with that, I walked out. I didn't know what was next. I didn't know if this was the end or the beginning. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her define me anymore. I left the house that night, the door clicking shut behind me, and it felt like the world had suddenly gone silent. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from her, away from the house that had once felt like a home. I could still feel the sting of her words, echoing in my mind. You're not the man I thought you were. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that, but this time it was different. There was no coming back from it. Not anymore. I had always considered myself a patient man. I'd put up with so much over the years, her moods, her silence, the way she would pull away when I needed her the most. But this was the breaking point. She had pushed me to a place I hadn't been in years, a place where I had no choice but to look at myself and realize that I had become someone I didn't even recognize. I had become the version of me that she thought was weak, passive, invisible. I thought about calling a friend or going to my brother's place, but I didn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring past me as the minutes turned into hours. Eventually, I ended up in a diner on the outskirts of town. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the cold night air, and the smell of greasy food filled the space. I took a seat at the counter and ordered coffee, something to ground me, even though I didn't feel like I could be grounded. My mind was racing, but I needed to focus. What now? Where do I go from here? The truth was, I wasn't sure what the next step was. Leaving had felt like the only option in that moment, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt in the back of my mind. I hadn't just walked out on her. I'd walked out on everything we built. And while I could feel the weight of that, the freedom of the decision was intoxicating. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about anyone else. I was thinking about me. The waitress brought over my coffee and smiled politely, but I wasn't really paying attention. I stirred my cup absent-mindedly, watching the dark liquid swirl. I was lost in thought, replaying the last conversation with Amara over and over in my head. Had I made the right choice? Had I done the right thing? My phone buzzed. It was a text from her. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether or not to read it. Maybe I should have ignored it, let it go. But curiosity won out. I tapped on the message. Where are you? Please come home. We need to talk. I chuckled bitterly to myself. Talk. That's all she ever wanted to do. Talk, but never really listen. I had tried for years to be what she needed, but nothing I did was ever enough. I put my phone down, feeling a strange mix of guilt and relief. Guilt because I knew I had just torn apart everything I had worked for, and relief because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't suffocating. I was free. I stayed in that diner for a while, long after the coffee had gone cold. It wasn't until the waitress started cleaning up that I decided it was time to leave. I still didn't know what I was doing, but I wasn't going back, not tonight. I had to figure out who I was without her. And as hard as that sounded, deep down, I knew it was something I had to do. I stepped outside into the chill of the night, the air sharp against my skin. I didn't have a plan, but for once, I didn't feel the need to have one. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. The city felt different as I walked down the empty streets. The weight of her words still lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed. And yet, there was a strange sense of liberation in it all. As the night air bit at my skin, I found myself walking faster, like I was escaping something. Escaping her, escaping everything I thought I knew about myself. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the hollow ache in my chest. The kind of ache you get when you know you've lost something important, but you're not sure what you were really holding on to in the first place. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I found myself wandering through places I hadn't been in years. Old bars, the quiet streets where I used to jog, parks that had once felt like they belonged to me. I couldn't shake the thought that I had let something slip away without even realizing it was slipping. The man I had been, The man I thought I still was. Wasn't the man she wanted. But was I that man? Was I someone I even liked? Around 3 a.m., I ended up sitting on a park bench. The city felt more like a distant dream than a reality. It was just me now, alone with my thoughts. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Amara. I stared at the screen, the glow of it harsh in the dark night. For a moment, I considered not answering. I didn't want to fall back into the same cycle, the same useless arguments. But something inside me still hoped for answers, something that maybe hadn't been said yet. I pressed answer. Sean, her voice cracked over the line. Where are you? Please come home. We need to talk. I didn't mean what I said. There it was. The desperate plea. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment she would realize how much I meant to her and beg me to come back. But instead of feeling relief, I felt anger. A sharp, sudden burst of it. Why was it always up to me to fix things? Why was I the one who always had to be the bigger person? I'm not coming back, I said, my voice colder than I intended. There was a long silence on the other end, the kind of silence that's full of unspoken words. I could hear her breathing, hear the strain in her voice as she tried to process what I'd just said. Why, Sean? Why are you doing this? Her voice was softer now, almost pleading. I don't want to lose you. But it was too late. The truth had already come crashing down on me. I had given so much of myself to her, to this relationship, trying to make her happy, trying to fix everything that had been broken. But I had forgotten one crucial thing. I was broken too. And for the first time in a long time, I was facing that fact head on. I can't keep pretending, Amara, I said, my words laced with finality. You want me to be something I'm not. You want a version of me that I can't give you anymore. You've been telling me for months that I'm not enough. But the truth is, I've been telling myself that for years. And I'm done with it. The silence stretched again, thick and heavy. I could feel the weight of her disappointment seeping through the phone. But I didn't feel bad. Not anymore. You always said I wasn't man enough, I continued, my voice steady now. Well, here's the thing, Amara. I'm man enough to walk away. Because a real man knows when it's time to leave. And that's what I'm doing. There was a choked sound from her end, and I knew she was crying. But I didn't care. Not anymore. I had spent so many years trying to fix things that weren't meant to be fixed. I had spent so many years bending myself in ways I couldn't even recognize anymore. And I was done. Without waiting for her response, I ended the call. The cold air felt like a breath of fresh air after suffocating for too long. I stood up from the bench, looking around at the empty streets. I had no idea where I was going, but for the first time in ages, I felt like I was finally moving in the right direction. This wasn't about getting revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to her. It was about me. About finally putting myself first. For the first time, I was choosing myself over everything else. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. I wasn't going back. Not to her, not to that life. Whatever came next, it was going to be on my terms. And for once, I felt like I was finally living. The following days felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything I had known, everything I had built, seemed like a distant memory. I didn't realize how much of my identity had been tied to her and the life we had created together until I was standing outside of it, watching it all fade away. The house was no longer home, just a collection of rooms filled with echoes of a past that felt foreign. I avoided all contact with Amara after that night. The silence between us grew heavy, suffocating. I kept my phone on silent, not wanting to hear her calls or read her messages. But despite my resolve, there were moments when doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if I had just overreacted? Maybe I was just angry. Maybe I was being too harsh. But then I'd remember the way she had looked at me in that last conversation, the coldness in her eyes. I had spent too long trying to meet her expectations, trying to live up to a version of myself that she had created. I had been trying to be the man she wanted, instead of the man I needed to be. I spent the next few days aimlessly, figuring out where I was going next. I didn't have a clear plan, just the need to get away. I found myself driving for hours, not really caring about the destination. I just needed space. The air in the city had become stifling. I needed to breathe, to think, to feel alive again. I ended up in a small town a couple of hours away, somewhere quiet and unfamiliar. I booked a room in a cheap motel, my only company the flickering light from the neon sign outside. There was something comforting about the anonymity of it all, the idea that no one knew me here. It felt like I could reinvent myself, as if no one had any expectations of me. I spent the first night in silence, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls. There were no calls, no texts, just the hum of the air conditioner and the faint sound of traffic in the distance. It was peaceful, but it was also empty. The next day, I decided to take a walk around the town. The streets were quiet, dotted with small shops and old buildings that had seen better days. It was a far cry from the city I had left behind, but it felt like the right place to be, at least for now. I walked for hours, lost in my thoughts, trying to figure out what to do next. In some ways, it was comforting to be so far away from everything. No expectations, no pressure. But there was also a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. What was I running from? Had I made the right choice? I wasn't sure, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild myself from the ground up, a chance to finally be the man I had forgotten I was. The next few weeks passed by in a haze. I didn't make any plans or set any goals. I simply existed, moving through each day like a shadow. I was in this strange limbo, no longer tied to the life I had known, yet not yet fully free. I kept myself busy, working odd jobs, fixing things around the small motel, just trying to keep my mind from wandering back to her, to Amara. But you can't escape your past forever, no matter how far you run. It always catches up with you, like a dark cloud hanging over your shoulder. One evening, as I sat at the motel's tiny diner, nursing a cup of coffee, I overheard a conversation from the next table. A couple was talking, their voices low but sharp, like they were in the middle of something. The woman said something that made my stomach tighten. "You don't even know who I am anymore." I froze. It wasn't the words that struck me. It was the tone, the raw emotion behind them. The same tone I had heard from Amara. The same bitterness that had started to creep into our relationship toward the end. I suddenly realized just how much I had been avoiding. I had distanced myself from everything, hoping the silence would bring peace, but instead, it was suffocating me. It hit me like a slap. I wasn't just running from her. I was running from myself. I knew I had to confront it. If I didn't, it would always haunt me. I couldn't just hide in this small town forever, pretending that everything I had left behind didn't matter. I had to go back, even if it meant facing everything I had been avoiding. The thought of seeing Amara again made my stomach churn, but I knew it was inevitable. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't care. No matter how angry I was, no matter how justified I felt in my decision to walk away, there was still a part of me that missed her. That part of me still wanted to know if there was any chance of redemption, if we could ever fix what had been broken. So, I packed my things, leaving the motel room behind, and got into my car. As I drove, the miles stretched out before me like an endless road. Each mile was a decision, a step closer to something I wasn't sure I was ready for. I arrived back in the city just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows on the pavement. My house, our house, looked just as I had left it, but somehow, everything felt different. The door seemed heavier when I pushed it open, the silence inside somehow louder. The once familiar scent of coffee and clean sheets was gone, replaced by the smell of something stale, like time had stopped. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, unsure of what to do next. The weight of everything hit me at once. I could feel the uncertainty creeping in again, the old doubts resurfacing. What was I even hoping for? That Amara would suddenly understand. That we could pick up where we left off and somehow make everything okay? I knew that wasn't going to happen. But still, a part of me hoped. A part of me wanted to believe that the love we once had could be enough to fix what had been broken. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her yet. But as I walked deeper into the house, I realized something. I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to know exactly what was going to happen next. I just needed to be honest with myself. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face the truth, whatever that might be. I knocked 3 times on the door. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, not something you see in the movies where the hero storms in with anger in his eyes. No, this was different. The knock felt more like an invitation, to the unknown, to something that had been left unsaid for far too long. The door opened slowly, revealing Amara standing on the other side. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and her eyes, though tired, still held that familiar spark. For a moment, we just stared at each other, neither of us speaking, both unsure of what to say. "You came back," she said softly, almost as if she were surprised by her own words. I nodded, but there was a lump in my throat. This wasn't how I had imagined it. I didn't expect her to greet me with open arms or tears of joy. But I also didn't expect this awkward silence, this distance between us, as if the years we'd spent together meant nothing. I didn't know where else to go. I admitted, my voice hoarse. I've been running for weeks, but I couldn't keep pretending like none of this matters. She stepped aside, allowing me to enter, and for a moment, I hesitated. I didn't want to cross that threshold again, not when I wasn't sure of anything. But my feet moved before my mind could catch up, and I found myself inside, in the very place where everything had started to fall apart. I never thought I'd see you again, she said, her voice low. There was an edge to it, something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was relief, maybe resentment. But it was there, a crack in her tone that told me she wasn't as sure of everything as she wanted me to believe. I don't know what I'm expecting either, I replied, looking around the room, avoiding her gaze. I had to come back. I had to face this, face you, face myself. There was a long silence between us, thick with words neither of us could say. She moved toward the kitchen, her back to me as she busied herself with something. Anything to avoid the tension that hung between us. I didn't know how long it had been since we had shared a meal, or even a conversation that wasn't forced. But tonight, something felt different. I'm sorry, she said, her voice catching slightly. I didn't mean everything I said. I was angry, frustrated. I don't know. I just couldn't see past it anymore. I thought maybe if I said those things, you'd wake up. But now I don't know. It's too late for apologies. The words hit me harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger, to remind her of everything she had said, everything I had gone through. But another part of me, the part that had never fully let go of her, softened. Maybe it's not too late, I said, my voice quiet. But maybe it's too late for us to go back to what we had. We've both changed, Amara. I don't think we can just pick up where we left off. She turned to face me, her eyes searching mine. So what do we do now? I exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of my neck. I don't know, but I think we need to be honest with ourselves. This isn't about fixing everything we've broken. It's about figuring out if there's anything left worth saving, and if we're even capable of saving it. Her eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, there was no bitterness, no anger in her gaze. It was just sadness, and maybe a little hope. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. But I don't know if I can love you the way I used to. That was the truth. And as much as it stung, I knew it wasn't just her saying it. I felt it too, deep inside me. Something had shifted between us. The love we once had. It was no longer enough to hold us together. I think it's time we let go, I said, my voice steadier now. Not because we don't care, but because we've reached the point where love alone isn't enough to fix what's been broken. She nodded, her face unreadable. And in that moment, something shifted between us. Not just the end of our marriage, but an understanding. We had both reached the same conclusion, even if we didn't want to admit it. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Not because it was easy, but because it was the right thing to do. The hardest thing to do, but the right thing. I turned to leave, my hand on the door. But before I walked out, she said something that caught me off guard. Maybe one day, we can start over, not as us, but as ourselves. Separate, but not strangers. I didn't know what to say to that. All I could do was nod and step outside, closing the door behind me. The night air felt cold against my skin, but it was the kind of cold that comes with clarity. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward. I wasn't sure where I was going next, but for the first time, I was sure that I was on the right path. The drive away from Amara's house was quieter than I expected. I thought there would be something, relief, anger, some sort of emotional release, but there was nothing. It felt like I was drifting, not even fully present in the moment. The road stretched out in front of me, endless and cold, just like the emotions swirling in my chest. I had come back to find closure, but it seemed like that wasn't something I was going to get from her. The words she had said, maybe one day, we can start over, still echoed in my mind. Part of me wanted to hold on to that, to believe it was possible. But the other part of me, the part that had been suffocating for so long, knew the truth. There was no going back. The thought of her, of us, lingered as I drove farther from the city. The car's tires hummed against the road, each mile a reminder of everything I was leaving behind. But it wasn't just about her. It wasn't even just about us anymore. It was about me. The person I had been with her, complacent, unsure, always putting her needs first, was gone. I could feel it in every breath I took. There was a freedom in walking away, but also a strange emptiness. How had I gotten here? How had I let things fall so far? By the time I stopped for gas, I felt drained, exhausted from the weight of it all. I stood by the pump, staring at the empty highway ahead of me. What now? I had no plan, no idea what I was supposed to do next. I thought about calling my brother, telling him everything, getting advice. But I didn't. Maybe it was pride, or maybe I just didn't want anyone else involved. This was my mess to clean up, my decision to face. The night was settling in, and the darkness felt heavier now. I could see the lights of the small town in the distance. Another stop, another place to disappear. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I couldn't stay in limbo forever. I couldn't stay stuck in the past. I got back into my car, pulling out of the gas station, and as I drove into the night, I made a silent promise to myself. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of where it might lead. It took months, but eventually, I found a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I had done the hard work of rediscovering myself, of rebuilding from the ashes of what once was. The loneliness was no longer suffocating. It had transformed into something else, something freeing. I realized that leaving Amara, painful as it was, had been the best thing I could have done for myself. I got a new job in a city a few hours away. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and I was good at it. I started to make friends, people who didn't know the old version of me, people who saw me for who I was now. The weight of the past gradually lifted, and I began to thrive. One day, while sitting in a coffee shop, I received a message from a mutual acquaintance of mine and Amara's, someone I hadn't heard from in a while. They told me something that made my blood run cold, then simmer with a dark sense of satisfaction. Amara had started seeing someone new. At first, I didn't feel much, just a vague sense of indifference. But then I learned more. The man she had chosen? He wasn't the guy she thought he was. He had already been involved with someone else when they started seeing each other. The relationship was built on lies, just as hers with me had been. I didn't feel happy about it, but something in me couldn't help but think that maybe this was the universe balancing things out. The choices she made after we parted had always been about avoiding responsibility, about trying to fill the empty spaces without ever really looking at herself. And now, those choices were leading her into a mess of her own making. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I had learned, painfully, that nothing, no matter how much you try to force it, could stay together if it wasn't meant to be. And Amara's choices, just like mine, had consequences. The life she was building now, without me, was already beginning to unravel. In a way, I felt relief. It wasn't revenge, it was simply karma. I had walked away to save myself, and I was better for it. As for her, well, maybe one day she'd figure it out, but it wasn't my job anymore to fix her. A year later, I was standing in a new apartment, unpacking the last of the boxes, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time: gratitude. I had survived. I had rebuilt. And, most importantly, I had found my way back to myself. In the end, leaving Amara was the best decision I'd ever made. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the thing that freed me. The man I had become was someone strong, someone who understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or bitterness. It's walking away, building something better, and letting life balance itself out. I had my peace, and for the first time in a long time, I could say that I was finally happy, free of the past, and ready for whatever came next.